The snow had teeth tonight. Vivian pulled her threadbare cloak tighter over her swollen belly and tried not to shake, because shaking wasted heat, and heat was the one thing the Borderlands never gave back. The old marker stones of Ashfang Pack stood half buried in ice behind her, black with age and wolf blood, as if even the land remembered who it was allowed to keep and who it was meant to spit out. She was one of the spit out, 8 months pregnant, ribs sharp as knife handles, ankles swollen, and hungry enough that the smell of tallow from distant guard fires made her mouth ache. A rabbit track crossed the drift near her boot. She stared at it too long, calculating whether she had the strength to shift and hunt. She didn't. Not in this cold. Not with her hips already splitting under the weight of the pup tucked low and heavy. Her wolf pressed restlessly inside her, all raw nerves and maternal panic. At dusk she had gone to the outer infirmary anyway, because pain had changed in the last day, tightening bands around her back that made her see white. She'd stood at the threshold while 2 apprentices blocked her with crossed arms, their nostrils flaring at her scent like she was rot. "Get off the porch, traitor," one had said. "I need Mara," Vivian had answered, voice hoarse. "The baby's dropped. Something's wrong." The other apprentice had laughed, bright and cruel. "What's wrong is you're still breathing." They made her wait in the sleet until the healer finally emerged. Mara's hair was braided in the old style of Oathkeepers, silver beads clicking as she moved. Once, Vivienne had trusted those hands to set broken bones. Once, Mara had held her wrist and said, "You carry old fire in your line, child. Protect it." Now Mara would not meet her eyes. Vivienne gripped the railing and forced calm into her voice. "Tell me true. How long?" Mara pressed fingers to her belly through wet wool, too quick, too shallow. She listened for all of 3 breaths, then stepped back and wiped her hands on a cloth as if Vivian had stained her. "Weeks yet," Mara said. 2, maybe 3. These are false pains." "They don't feel false. Everything feels dramatic when you're guilty." "I did not poison Luna Alara." Mara's mouth tightened. "The Luna is dead. Your tincture was in her tea. The council has named you blood unclean. You're lucky they exiled you instead of opening your throat." Vivian's vision swam with rage and exhaustion. "You signed my herb logs yourself. You know what I brewed." "I know what I was told to know." Mara's voice dropped, low enough the apprentices had to lean to hear. "Go farther north. If labor starts, it won't be until the next moon turn. You have time." Then softer, right against Vivienne's ear, a whisper with no warmth in it at all. "Try not to make a mess where the patrols can see." By full dark, the first hard contraction bent her nearly double in a stand of dead pines. Weeks yet. Liar. Vivienne stumbled down into the ravine where the wind cut less sharply. Her hands were numb, her boots were wet through. Each step sent a deep, grinding pain through her pelvis. The pup kicked once, then went eerily still. Terror flooded her so fast she tasted copper. "No, no, no," she breathed, palms spread over her belly. "Little Ember, move for me." A faint flutter answered after a long heartbeat. Relief cracked her open so hard she had to bite her knuckle to stop crying out. Above her, on the ridge, wolves were moving. She heard them before she saw them, paws compacting crusted snow, leather creaking, the low jingle of bit rings. Patrol. Not Ashfang's regular route. She crouched behind a split boulder and held still, every muscle trembling. 2 voices carried down. "Mara says tonight, ravine by the broken marker, she'll be alone and half in labor. Stormborn wants the child breathing." The mother? A shrug in the dark. "Doesn't matter if she is." Vivian's breath froze in her throat. The world narrowed to 4 words. Mara says tonight. Not neglect, not mistake. A message. She had treated fever in Mara's own son when no one else would touch him. She had sat beside Mara after her mate died and brewed dreamless sleep so the woman could rest one night without seeing blood. She had begged for truth and been handed a timetable for her own death. A sharp cramp tore through her abdomen, stronger than all the others. Fluid ran hot down her thigh, instantly cooling in the wind. Her water had broken. Panic tried to scatter her thoughts, but some hard old training took over. Move, hide scent, survive 1 hour at a time. She tore a strip from her underskirt, stuffed it between her legs, and forced herself deeper into the ravine where jutting rock narrowed the path to a throat. Above, the patrol voices faded. Then came another sound she knew too well, the short, high whine of scent hounds catching trail. They had loosed dogs on a pregnant wolf. Vivian pushed into motion. Snow sucked at her boots. Branches clawed her face. Another contraction seized her spine and drove her to one knee. She gagged, spat, rose again. Her wolf wanted to shift and run on 4 legs, but shifting this close to birth could kill the pup. She stayed in skin and kept moving. The ravine twisted east, toward lands no Ashfang wolf crossed without treaty leave. Silvermane territory began somewhere beyond the granite bluffs. Enemy ground, crown ground, king's ground. Wolves whispered of Alpha King Xavier Silvermane like a storm given bones. Ruthless, patient, undefeated. To trespass there while branded traitor was one kind of death. To stay where she was another. Behind her, a horn sounded once, answered by another farther north. They were closing the net. She slipped on ice and slammed her shoulder into rock hard enough to see stars. Pain lit down her arm. The pup rolled, and for one sick moment she thought she'd crushed him. Then a heel pressed under her ribs. Alive. Still alive. Keep breathing, she told herself out loud. Her voice came ragged, animal. In. Out. You get him to shelter. Then you can fall apart. A shadow detached from the trees ahead. Vivian lurched back, hand going to the bone knife at her thigh. The figure raised both palms slowly. Not Ashfang colors. Gray leather, silver-threaded cuffs, a scout's cloak, the insignia stitched at the shoulder, a white wolf's eye split by a vertical line. Silvermane. The scout was female, broad-shouldered, rain-dark hair braided tight under a hood. Her gaze dropped once to Vivian's belly, then flicked behind her toward the pursuing horn calls. You crossed the boundary 200 paces back, she said. No kindness, no cruelty, just fact. Stayed intent. Vivian swallowed blood where she'd bitten her cheek. Sanctuary. Another contraction gripped her, stealing half the word. Please. The scout's nostrils flared. Her posture changed instantly, combat ready to alert. You're in labor. Earlier than expected. The woman made a short, disbelieving sound. You're not expected? Vivian barked a laugh that was nearly a sob. Apparently, I was expected exactly. From behind came the baying of hounds, louder now. The scout turned her head and let out a sharp, carrying whistle. 3 answering whistles returned from the ridge. Then she stepped to Vivian's side and offered an arm. Can you run? No. Then you'll limp fast. They moved. Vivian leaned hard into the scout's support, boots sliding over shale. The cold air scorched her lungs. She could smell everything too clearly. The metallic tang of her own blood, pine sap crushed underfoot, the distant smoke of large cook fires that meant walls, soldiers, civilization. Every few strides, pain doubled her over, and the scout waited exactly 3 breaths before hauling her onward. Ahead, the ravine opened onto a wide shelf of snow and black stone. Torches burned in iron baskets. Beyond them rose the outer watchtowers of Silvermane Keep, carved directly into mountain face like fangs, and between Vivian and the gate stood a warband. 24 wolves in traveling armor, helms clipped to belts, cloaks snapping in the wind. Not a patrol. Not chance. A force assembled and facing outward as if expecting an attack from the border. as if expecting her. At their center, mounted on a dark horse that steamed in the cold, sat a male so still he seemed carved from moonlit granite. Broad shoulders, black hair bound at his nape, a scar crossing one brow into his temple. Silver eyes that found her instantly and did not leave. Xavier Silvermane. Vivian had seen him once at a distance during treaty season, all crown and claws and careful menace. Here, in Stormlight, he looked worse. More dangerous because he was real. He swung down from the horse before any guard moved, boots hitting snow with a muffled thud. The scout beside Vivian dipped her head. "My king, border claimant requests sanctuary, active labor." Xavier did not answer her right away. He was already striding toward Vivian, cloak whipping behind him, his guards tensed, sensing something shift, though none of them knew what yet. Vivienne bared her teeth and fumbled for her knife again, because instinct screamed alpha. Threat, protect the pup. "Stay back," she rasped. He stopped one arm's length away and inhaled. Everything detonated. Heat slammed through her scent glands, hot and wild and unmistakable. Her wolf surged to the surface, not in fear, but in recognition so violent it hurt. Somewhere deep in her belly, the baby that had been restless for days went abruptly, profoundly calm, as if a hand had settled over him from the inside. Xavier jerked as if struck. His eyes flashed from steel gray to molten silver gold. The command he'd been about to give died in his throat. He looked at her torn cloak, her blood-wet legs, the knife shaking in her fist, with a raw, incredulous hunger that had nothing to do with politics. "Impossible," someone in the warband whispered. Vivian hated the relief that flooded her with the bond, hated the answering pull in her own chest, hated that her body knew him before her mind could choose. Another contraction ripped through her. She cried out and folded forward. Xavier moved on instinct, catching her before she hit the ground. His hands were huge, careful, burning through her soaked clothes. He tore off his own fur-lined cloak and wrapped it around her shoulders like armor. When he spoke, the battlefield iron in his voice was gone. It came out rough, almost reverent. "Mine." "Don't," Vivian hissed, though she was already in his arms. The word came out thin, shredded by pain and by the bond humming under her skin like live wire. Xavier didn't flinch. His cloak swallowed her, thick fur trapping precious heat around her shoulders and belly. He kept one hand braced at her back, the other under her elbow, holding her upright without pinning her. Behind them, horns cried again from the ravine. Xavier's gaze flicked past her to the dark tree line, then snapped back to her face. That silver-gold flare in his eyes hadn't faded. If anything, it burned brighter, starved and stunned all at once. "Look at me," he said. She almost refused on principle. Then another contraction seized her spine and dragged a cry from her throat. Her knees buckled. Xavier caught her weight, and the instant his palm spread over the curve of her belly, electricity skated through both of them. She felt it, actually felt the answering jolt in him, the way his breath punched out hard, the way his pulse lurched against his throat. Inside her, her wolf surged up with a raw, aching certainty. "Mate." "No," Vivian whispered, to him, to herself, to fate. "No, not now." His jaw tightened as if he'd bitten down on iron. "I know. You were waiting." She forced the accusation through clenched teeth. "Mara sent word. I heard them say it. She sold me to Stormborn, and you were already here. So what is this, Silvermane? Rescue? Trade?" Her laugh cracked. "Did she auction me to both sides?" For one heartbeat, something murderous flashed across his face at Mara's name. Not directed at her, past her, toward whoever had engineered this. "I was waiting for a strike on my border," he said, voice low. "Not for you." Another whine of hounds floated from the ravine, closer. Xavier turned his head. "Rhea!" He barked to the scout who had brought Vivian in. Left flank down into the cut. Archers high. If Ashfang crosses the line, they leave in pieces. A chorus of, "Yes, my king," snapped back. Then he looked at Vivian again, and the war voice vanished as abruptly as it had come. "Can you walk?" She bared her teeth. "Do I have a choice?" "Yes." The answer was immediate. "I can carry you, but only if you permit it." The bond pulsed between them, hungry and terrible. He could have compelled. Every alpha in the borderlands would have. He could have used the moment, used her weakness, used the instinct screaming mine through both wolves. He didn't. Vivienne stared at him, wind tearing at her hair, snow stinging her cheeks, blood cooling between her thighs. "Why ask?" she demanded. His throat worked once before he answered. "Because you are in pain, not in chains." Something hot and confused twisted under her ribs, almost worse than the contractions. The hounds bayed again, close enough now that even human ears could track them. "Carry me," she said at last, the words tasting like surrender and survival both. Xavier slid one arm under her knees and lifted her as if she weighed nothing. The motion jolted her abdomen. She groaned and grabbed his collar. His scent hit her full force. Winter cedar, steel, and the sharp ozone edge of storm. The bond drank it like thirst. Every guard in the warband watched, stunned silent, as their king strode for the gate with a blood-marked exile in his arms. Vivienne kept her knife in her fist the entire way. The fortress swallowed sound. Inside Silvermane Keep, heat hit her face in waves from braziers set along the stone corridor. Servants and soldiers flattened themselves to walls as Xavier passed, eyes widening at the sight of her. She heard whispers crack and die under the weight of his presence. "Midwife team to the lower birthing chamber," he snapped to a waiting steward. "Now, and fetch healer Isolde." A hard cramp ripped through Vivienne before they reached the stair. She arched, choking on a scream. Xavier dropped to one knee with her still in his arms so she wouldn't slide, his forehead briefly touching hers while she shook. "Breathe with me," he said, rough and relentless. "In 4, out 6. She would have told him to go to hell if she'd had enough air. Instead, she followed, because her body needed an anchor and his voice was one. By the time they reached the chamber, she was sweating through her torn dress despite the cold. The room itself was unexpected. No gilded royal bed, no ceremonial nonsense. Just clean stone, low fire, boiled linen stacked in neat piles, herbs hanging from ceiling beams. Practical. Prepared. Male guards started to follow Xavier inside. He didn't even look at them. "Out." "My king. Protocol." "Out," he repeated. And this time the word rolled with enough alpha force to rattle the copper pans on the wall. They backed out instantly. The door boomed shut. An older woman with iron-gray braids, Isolde, moved to Vivienne's side, efficient hands assessing belly and pulse. Her expression sharpened. "Crowning by dawn if she doesn't stall," Isolde said. "Maybe sooner. She's exhausted and underfed." Vivienne gave a ragged laugh. "Weeks," Mara said. Isolde's face went still. "Mara of Ashfang?" "Yes." Isolde looked over her shoulder at Xavier. Then she lied, and she knew exactly how close this was. Xavier's eyes went flat. Lethal. "She'll answer for it." He stripped off his bracers, set his sword against the far wall and, while Vivienne and both healers stared, sat down on the floor beside the birthing pallet instead of taking the carved chair in the corner. Isolde blinked. "My king, you don't need to. I'm not leaving." He rolled his sleeves up to his elbows. "Tell me what to do that helps." For 13 brutal hours he stayed. Not hovering, not commanding. Staying. He held a basin when she vomited, pressed cool cloths to the back of her neck when fever heat climbed, counted through contractions in that low, unshakable cadence until she could curse him in rhythm. When she clawed his forearm hard enough to draw blood, he didn't pull away. Twice, messengers knocked. Twice, he sent them away with a growl and never rose. At some point near dawn, pain and terror stripped Vivian down to pure animal. She panted, shaking, legs trembling uncontrollably. "I can't," she gasped. "I can't do this." "Yes, you can," Isolde said. "No," Vivienne sobbed. "No more alphas telling me what I can survive." Xavier shifted closer but kept his hands visible, waiting for her nod before touching her wrist. "All right," he said quietly. "Then hear this. Not as your alpha. As your mate." She laughed bitterly, feral. "Mate, alphas want heirs and obedience. That's all." Something in his face cracked open. He took her hand and placed it flat against his throat, right over the hard hammer of his pulse. "If I ever treat you as less than equal," he said, voice hoarse, "close your hand and crush my airway." The chamber went still except for the fire. Vivienne stared at him, fingers splayed against warm skin and stubble. He was serious. Completely, terrifyingly serious. Another contraction slammed through her. She screamed, bore down, and his hand was on her shoulder, steady, not controlling. "That's it," he said. "Again, with me, now." The world narrowed to pressure, heat, tearing, breath. Isolde's command cut through fog. "One more push, Vivienne. One." She roared and pushed. A thin cry split the room. Then a second, stronger one. Her son. Relief detonated so hard it hurt. Isolde lifted a blood-slick, furious infant into waiting towels. "Male," she announced, grinning despite herself. "Lungs like war drums." Vivian collapsed back, sobbing and laughing and shaking so violently her teeth clicked. Xavier looked once at the child, one single glance to confirm he was breathing, then turned immediately to Vivienne. He took her trembling hand, lifted her scraped knuckles to his mouth, and kissed them. "Thank you," he whispered, forehead pressed to her wrist. "For surviving. Not for the heir, not for my son. For surviving." Vivian closed her eyes, exhausted beyond speech, and let him hold her hand until sleep dragged her under. By the time she could stand without the room tilting, rumors had outrun the snowmelt. Some said the king had dragged a traitor to his bed. Others said he'd found his fated mate bleeding at the border and declared blood protection over her. Most agreed on one thing: the child in the royal nursery had changed the balance of every alliance in the north. Vivienne had no patience for rumors. She had stitches, cracked sleep, milk-stained tunics, and a son who hated being put down. On the fourth day, a summons came. "Council convenes at midday," said a young attendant, eyes fixed on the floor. "The allied alphas request clarification." Vivian snorted softly. Clarification. Convenient word for surrender, the inconvenient woman. She almost refused to go. Then she looked at the sleeping infant in his carved cradle, dark hair already visible, tiny fist curled by his cheek, and knew hiding would only make her easier to bargain over. So she wrapped him to her chest in a sling, squared her shoulders, and walked to the throne hall. The chamber was a bowl of marble and banners, winter light pouring through high windows. 6 allied alphas stood in a crescent before Xavier's throne, their scents layered in old dominance and political rot. Elders crowded the side galleries. The moment Vivian entered, conversation thinned into a hush. An elder from Frostmaw stepped forward, chin lifted. "Your Majesty, we object to her presence in this chamber." Xavier, seated above them in black and silver, said nothing. The elder continued, louder. "She stands accused in her birth pack of poisoning a Luna. She arrived unmated and heavy with child on your border under suspicious circumstances. Until formal interrogation is complete, she should be surrendered to neutral custody." Neutral? Vivian almost laughed. There was no neutral when crowns were involved. Another alpha added, If the child's bloodline is disputed, coalition law requires witness testing. We cannot let sentiment compromise succession. Sentiment. Vivian felt heat climb her spine. Her wolf stirred, hackles lifting. Before she could speak, Xavier rose. He descended the dais slowly, each step echoing. The room tracked him like prey tracks a predator. He stopped beside Vivian, not in front of her, not behind. Beside. Then, to every wolf in the hall, he did the unthinkable. He bared his throat to her. Not a token tilt. Full exposure, pulse and scar and vulnerability offered in plain sight. Gasps snapped through the chamber. Vivian went still, shocked to the bone. Xavier straightened and turned back to the gathered alphas, voice carrying to the rafters. Any wolf who questions her legitimacy, he said, questions mine. Any wolf who reaches for her reaches for the crown. The Frostmaw elder scoffed. You'd tie a kingdom to a female under murder stain? Xavier's smile was all teeth. I would burn one down first. The elder took a step forward anyway, dominant scent flaring. He never reached her. Xavier shifted partially in a blur. Claws, fangs, shoulders exploding wider, and slammed the elder to the marble so hard the crack echoed. A collective snarl rolled through the guard line. Xavier pinned the older wolf with one hand at his throat, just enough pressure to make him choke. Blood protection, Xavier growled, voice distorted by the shift. On my queen and my pup. Test it again. Queen. The word hit Vivian harder than the display of force. No one moved. No one breathed too loud. After a long, razor-thin silence, the elder banged his fist once on the floor in submission and looked away. One by one, the other alphas dipped their heads, not deep enough for loyalty, but deep enough for law. Xavier released him and stepped back, claws retracting, gaze never leaving the room until every challenge scent dulled. Then he turned to Vivian, checking her face first. Then the baby, as if the hall full of predators mattered less than whether her hands were shaking. They were. He didn't touch her without permission, just held out his palm between them. Open. A choice. Vivian looked at that offered hand for a long moment, at the scar across his knuckles from where she had bitten him during labor, at the restraint coiled under his skin like tempered steel. Then she placed her fingers in his, not fully trusting, not yet, but no longer braced to run. Her fingers had barely settled into his palm when the great bronze doors slammed open hard enough to bang against stone. Rhea strode in, snow crusting her shoulders, a bloodied strip of leather in her fist. Two guards dragged a bound wolf behind her in tempest claw colors. Storm blue stitching, lightning sigil at the collar, one eye swollen shut. Intercepted at the east post, Rhea said, breathing hard. He tried to burn this before we took him. She held out the leather strip to Xavier Silvermane. He scanned it once, jaw turning to iron, then passed it to Vivian. The script was coded in merchant shorthand, but she recognized the hand immediately. Mara's narrow, angled letters, each loop clipped short as if afraid of being caught saying too much. Asset in active labor before moonset, border ravine, no escort. King likely deployed south after decoy skirmish. Retrieve mother if viable. Priority remains newborn blood. At the bottom sat a second mark, impressed in dark blue wax. A broken lightning bolt over a wolf fang. Tempest claw. Vivian's stomach dropped like she'd swallowed ice. Stormborn. A murmur rippled through the hall galleries. Several elders went pale. One of the allied alphas who had challenged her minutes ago took an involuntary step back. The prisoner spat blood onto the marble. You think this changes anything? Alpha Stormborn has witnesses from her pack, sworn and sealed. By dawn, he'll stand at your gate and claim what's his. What exactly does he believe is his? Xavier asked softly. The prisoner grinned through split lips. The child, for one. He says the pup carries Stormborn line through the mother's side. Says you seized a fertile exile to fake a mating and steal succession rights. Says if you keep her, every oath pack that values law should rise against you. The chamber chilled despite the braziers. Not just an attack then. A fracture plan. Succession. Legitimacy. Coalition law. Every fault line in the north pried open at once. Vivienne heard her own pulse pounding in her ears. He doesn't care about blood truth. He wants war with legal perfume. Xavier turned to her, eyes sharp. You know this strategy. She gave a short, humorless laugh. Stormborn buys rot and calls it justice. He did it in Ashfang before Alara died, funding grain shipments with poison-riddled contracts, then offering protection when packs started starving. He never strikes first with claws. He strikes with paperwork and hunger. The prisoner lunged suddenly toward Vivienne, restrained wrists swinging. A guard slammed him to his knees. Xavier didn't raise his voice. Take him below. Keep him alive. As they dragged the scout away, Vivienne's son stirred against her chest, small face scrunching before he settled again to the rhythm of her heartbeat. Her arms tightened around him reflexively. Xavier noticed. He noticed everything. Clear the hall, he ordered. No one argued. Within moments, the marble bowl emptied to just the two of them, Rhea at the far arch, and the sound of winter wind moaning through arrow slits. Vivienne pulled her hand from his and reached into the inner seam of the sling. Her fingers found oiled cloth, folded thin and flat. She had sewn it there the first night of exile, praying no one would strip-search a pregnant outcast. She handed it to him. Inside was a pocket ledger no bigger than his palm, edges warped by damp. Mara's ledger. Every bribe disguised as herb inventory, every coded name linked to dates, patrol routes, tincture requests. Xavier flipped pages, expression darkening line by line. You had this the whole time? I took it while she examined me. Vivienne's voice went brittle. When she leaned in to whisper that I shouldn't make a mess where patrols could see, her satchel was open. I thought maybe if I survived the night I'd need proof. She swallowed. I didn't think I'd survive. He closed the ledger carefully, like it might explode. This ties Mara to Tempest Clawcoin, he said. And to the poisoning rumor. To my sentence, Vivienne corrected. To your son being hunted before he drew breath? His nostrils flared at the word hunted, wolf surfacing just beneath skin. He wanted you isolated, Xavier said, almost to himself. Wanted the child alive and the mother expendable. If he could steal the infant, he controls succession claims in 3 packs. If I retaliate, he calls me tyrant. If I yield, I lose the crown. Vivienne met his gaze. He means to make you choose. A slow, dangerous smile touched Xavier's mouth, all predator. Then he miscalculated, he said. I don't choose under threat. By dusk, the keep moved like a drawn bow. Runners pounded stairwells with sealed orders. Armory fires stayed lit. Sentries doubled along the eastern wall. In the lower courtyards, wolves sharpened blades and checked bowstrings while snow began falling again in thick, silent sheets. Vivienne stood in the infirmary doorway with her son at her breast and watched soldiers prepare for a war that had her name on it. Every corridor carried some new pressure. An ally demanding she be moved to safer confinement. An elder insisting the baby be transferred to the royal nursery under guard for continuity. A legal advisor reciting tribunal statutes as if she were deaf. Safe meant controlled. Controlled meant silenced. By the 3rd interruption, she wanted to bite someone. Isolde took the empty cup from her and snorted. If you keep glaring like that, half the council will molt their fur. They're trying to split us, Vivienne muttered. Mother in one room, child in another, king on a wall. Easier to bargain in pieces. They're afraid, Isolde said. Afraid makes fools loud. Vivienne adjusted the sling, pressing her cheek to her son's warm head. Milk-sweet scent. New skin, the tiny huff of sleeping breath. A living reason men would murder and call it duty. Across the hall, Xavier emerged from the war room flanked by captains, map ink smudged over one hand. He was issuing orders before he fully crossed the threshold. Rhea, I want Tempest Claw approach routes trapped, but not collapsed. I want them slowed, not buried. Kellen, rotate archers every 2 hours, no fatigue gaps, and pull 2 healers to each village corridor in case of raid smoke. He saw Vivian and stopped mid-command. The bond snapped taut, awareness flooding both of them in one sharp wave. Exhaustion in him, adrenaline in her, the mutual gnawing pull under all the fear. He dismissed his captains with a glance. They peeled away. For a moment they just stood there, the corridor noisy around them, and yet strangely private. You should rest, he said. She laughed once. I've had 12 people tell me where I should be in the last hour. I'm not ordering. His gaze dropped to the baby, softened, then lifted back to her. I'm asking whether you can stand. Barely. A corner of his mouth twitched. Honest answer. Good. She hesitated, then said the thing she'd been biting back all afternoon. If Stormborn forces tribunal law, will your council try to separate him from me? Xavier's expression went still in that dangerous way it did before violence. Over my corpse. That's not procedure. I don't care. I do. Her voice sharpened. Because if we ignore law, he wins the narrative. He calls you tyrant and me usurper. Packs love a righteous lie more than a messy truth. His eyes flashed silver gold at her tone, then settled. You're right. The admission came without ego, and it disarmed her more than a growl would have. He stepped closer, slow enough for refusal. Then we prepare to beat him in his own arena. The nearness made heat creep up her throat despite herself. She could smell storm and steel and male wolf, and beneath it something newly familiar that eased her pulse against her will. Dangerous, this wanting. A runner skidded around the corner, breathless. My king, Northwatch confirms Tempest banners 3 valleys out, not raiders, main host. Of course, pressure from all sides. Xavier nodded once. Maintain beacon silence. We choose when they know our numbers. The runner bolted. Vivian looked up at him. He's not bluffing. No. He'll come with witnesses. With papers. With wolves ready to die for his version. Yes. Her fingers tightened on the sling. Then stop trying to put me behind stone. Let me see everything. Something like pride flickered across his face, quickly masked. Come to the strategy room after you feed him. We'll brief together. Together. The words settled in her bones with unsettling rightness. Night fell hard. Snow muted the keep to whispers, and for the first time since labor, no one knocked on her door for nearly an hour. Vivian sat by the nursery hearth in a chair too grand for her and watched firelight paint gold across her son's face. He had Xavier's mouth, she thought with a startled jolt. Her stubborn chin. A tiny crescent birthmark at the base of his neck, like a thumbprint of moonlight. The door opened quietly. Xavier entered without guards, carrying a wooden tray. Broth, dark bread, dried plums, a pot of willowbark tea. Not a servant in sight. I threatened the kitchen with treason if they watered the broth, he said, setting it down. She stared at him. You did not. I did. A tired laugh escaped her before she could stop it. He lowered himself to the rug by her chair, long legs stretched toward the fire, and only then seemed to let the king fall off him. Shoulders slumped, eyes shadowed. A man, briefly, instead of a crown with teeth. Vivian ate while he fed split kindling into the hearth. They passed the baby back and forth in awkward, careful exchanges that grew less awkward by the 3rd attempt. When the child began fussing, Xavier took him against his chest and, after one startled glance from Vivian, started a low humming she didn't recognize. Not quite a lullaby, More a war cadence softened at the edges. The baby went still almost instantly. "You know how to do that," she murmured. "My mother used to hum it before council trials," he said. "She said rhythm teaches the heart there's a pattern even when the world is chaos." Vivian studied him in profile, fire-carving planes of scar and cheekbone. "Was she Luna?" He shook his head. "Regent. My father died before I could shift. Half the alphas around me called me unproven until I put one through a table at 16. A pause. "She taught me that mercy without teeth gets eaten." "And what did she teach you about mates?" His hands stilled on the baby's blanket. "That if I was lucky enough to find mine, I should ask what she wants before telling her what I can give." The honesty in it hit deeper than flirtation ever could. Vivian looked down at her own hands, knuckles still scraped from labor, veins fine and blue beneath healing skin. "I don't know what I want," she admitted, voice raw. "I want safety for him. I want Mara to answer. I want to sleep 3 hours without dreaming of hounds. And every time you come near, the bond makes promises my mind doesn't trust yet." He rose and crossed to her, then stopped within arm's reach. "Then don't promise," he said. "Not tonight." She swallowed. "What if you have to choose? Between Crown and you?" His jaw set. "I'll choose the path that keeps you both breathing, and I'll make the Crown survive it." "That sounds like confidence." "It's terror with better posture." She barked a surprised laugh, then clapped a hand over her mouth so as not to wake the baby. Xavier smiled. Brief, real, devastating. Carefully, he offered his hand again, palm up as in the hall. No demand, no alpha push, a choice. Vivienne laid her hand in his. He leaned in, slow enough she could turn away, and pressed his forehead to hers. The bond flared warm and steady, not consuming this time, more like a hearth catching after long cold. For several breaths they stayed like that, sharing air and exhaustion and the quiet crackle of fire. Her walls did not fall all at once, but one stone shifted. The first alarm came as a vibration through the floor, not loud, felt more than heard, like the mountain itself clearing its throat. Then came the horn. One long note, too short, border distress. Xavier's head snapped up. The baby startled and wailed. A guard hammered the nursery door. "My king! East beacon lit, then cut, and—" He gulped air. A hawk at the gate, dead. Xavier was already moving. Vivian had the child secured in the sling before the second horn sounded. They met Rhea in the inner ward, where snow blew in through the open gate tunnel and torches guttered in the draft. On a stone table lay a great gray hawk, neck broken, one wing pinned beneath it at an unnatural angle. A message tube was tied to its leg with red cord. Rhea didn't touch it. "Sent under truce custom. No poison spikes found." Xavier pulled the tube free and unrolled the parchment. His face went carved and terrible. "Read it," Vivienne said. He handed it to her. The letters were bold, slashing, unmistakably written for spectacle. To Xavier Silvermane, who cages what is not his. "Bring me the mother by moonrise, alive and unmarked by your claim, and I will spare your border villages. Refuse, and I burn them first so she can hear them scream from your walls. Bring the child, and I may leave you a crown to bury." Xavier Stormborn. A second sheet dropped from the tube, thinner parchment with tribunal seals impressed in black wax. Summons under ancient coalition statute. Appearance demanded at dawn in open assembly. Witnesses present to contest bloodline and charge murder by poison against Vivian Wildfire. Legal teeth and arson in the same breath. "He's already moving," Rhea said quietly. "Scout fire from Hollomere just went dark. We saw smoke before the snow swallowed it." Vivian's blood ran cold. Hollomere was a farming village. Families, not soldiers. Not bluffing. Around them, the ward erupted. Captains shouting. Runners dispatched. Bells starting up along the inner wall. Somewhere above, a child cried. Somewhere farther, wolves were already shifting for battle. Xavier took one look at Vivian and the baby and made a decision she could read in the hard line of his mouth. "Lock down the keep," he ordered. "No one in or out of the nursery tier without my scent clearance. Ready a strike unit for Hollowmere, and convene law council now. We answer the summons on our terms." He turned to Vivienne. "You're not leaving my sight." She stepped closer instead of back, parchment clenched in her fist. "Then don't ask me to hide while he burns people for my name," she said. A roar echoed from the eastern wall. Wolf voices, alarm and fury. Through the gate tunnel, the night sky flickered orange behind the snow. Fire. Xavier's gaze cut to the horizon, then back to her, bond blazing between them like a drawn blade. Moonrise was less than 3 hours away. Moonrise was less than 3 hours away. The eastern horizon kept flashing orange through the snow, each pulse reflected in Xavier's eyes like banked metal. Wolves sprinted across the inner ward with waterskins and shields. Somewhere on the ramparts, a ballista thudded into position. Vivian folded Stormborn's letter once, very neatly, and tucked it into her belt. "Get me a cloak that won't catch sparks," she said. Xavier stared at her as if he had misheard. "No. People are already burning." I said no. The word came out alpha hard, the kind of command that made lesser wolves drop their gaze. Vivian didn't. "You can lock me up and lose your villages anyway, or you can let me help gut the trap he built around my name." Rhea stepped forward, voice tight. "My king. East Rider confirms Hollowmere granaries were torched. Evacuation underway, but they need cover now." Xavier's jaw flexed. He looked from Rhea to Vivienne, to the baby tucked against her chest, then back to the flames staining the sky. Stormborn wanted this exact fracture. King at war, mate hidden, narrative owned by the loudest liar. Vivienne saw the calculation land in Xavier's face and hated that she respected it. "Law Council," he barked. 5 minutes. War Chamber." The chamber smelled of wet wool, ink, and fear. Maps lay weighted with knives. Legal scrolls had been flung open so fast their wax seals still clung in broken curls. Isolde stood beside Vivienne while 3 advisors argued statutes at machine gun pace. "Summons under Coalition Article 9, one said. "If we refuse appearance, Stormborn can claim default judgment." "Default on what grounds?" Another snapped. "He can't prove bloodline from rumor." "He doesn't need proof to start defections." Xavier planted both hands on the table. Options. Silence. Then Vivian spoke. "We don't refuse." Every head turned. "We invoke trial of scent and truth in open witness." One advisor blanched. "That trial is archaic and volatile. It allows direct scent challenge between accuser and accused. If either side fails..." "They're stripped of legal standing on the charge," Vivian finished, "permanently." The oldest advisor frowned. "Only an alpha may invoke it." Vivian tightened the sling across her shoulder and chest, cinching her son snug and high against her heartbeat beneath the cloak. Then she slid a knife from the map table, palm up, and cut her own thumb deep enough that blood welled black-red in firelight. "I invoke as bloodline claimant and targeted defendant," she said. "Under Wildfire Maternal Clause, it predates your article 9 by 2 centuries." The old advisor went still. Gods. He knew the law. Which meant Stormborn might not. Xavier was already moving, stripping off his gauntlet. "If she invokes, I stand second." Vivian shook her head. "No. He wants this to be king versus king." She pressed her bleeding thumb to a blank parchment and left a smeared print. "He doesn't get to erase me from my own trial." Their gazes locked, bond flaring sharp with shared fear and fury. Finally, Xavier exhaled through his teeth. Then you do not stand alone. Rhea, 12 with us. Isolde at Vivian's shoulder. No one takes him from our scent line. Isolde nodded once. On my life. Outside, a horn sounded from the east wall, then another from the gate. Parley banners were rising in the storm. They met at the tribunal stones below the keep, where old law demanded open sky and equal footing. Snow blew sideways across the circular dais. Torches hissed in iron brackets. Wolves from a dozen packs ringed the perimeter, rank by rank, weapons peace-bound, but hands close to hilts. Stormborn had come in theater. His host filled the lower slope in storm-blue cloaks, war paint streaked like lightning over their cheeks. At the center stood Xavier Stormborn himself, tall, broad, too handsome in that polished predator way. His smile never touched his eyes. To his right waited 3 hooded witnesses in Ashfang colors. To his left, bound but upright, stood Mara. Vivian's chest went cold. Mara's braids were ragged, one cheek bruised, but her gaze still slid away rather than meet Vivian's. Stormborn spread his arms. Silvermane, you answered. I admit, I expected more posturing. State your claim, Xavier said. Stormborn's eyes shifted to Vivian and lingered with deliberate insult. On her healing body, then on the bundled outline of the infant strapped to her chest beneath her cloak, as if both were leverage points instead of lives. Gladly, this female, Vivian Wildfire, stands accused of poisoning Luna Ilara of Ashfang. She fled judgment carrying a child of contested blood. Blood I assert is tied to Tempest Claw line through illicit pairing. Silvermane has harbored her, fabricated mating, and now seeks to force succession through fraud. Murmurs surged through the crowd. Stormborn lifted his chin toward the villages below the ridge, where smoke still smeared the sky. Surrender mother and child to neutral custody, and I suspend retaliatory actions while inquiry proceeds. Retaliatory actions, as if he had not lit the fires himself. Xavier took one step forward, dominance rolling off him like thunder. You burn civilians and call it inquiry? Stormborn smiled wider. I call it leverage. Movement at Vivian's side, Rhea tensing for a kill line. Vivian touched her wrist, stopping her. If this turned into brute force now, the legal rot survived even if Stormborn died. Someone else would pick it up later. She stepped onto the dais before Xavier could stop her. One palm braced protectively over the sling as snow caught in her hair and melted down her neck. Gasps broke around the ring. She was still weak, hips sore, body healing, but her voice carried clear. I invoke trial of scent and truth, she said, by Wildfire maternal clause and coalition witness law. A crackle went through the gathered wolves. Even Stormborn blinked, calculation flickering. You don't have standing, he said quickly. The old advisor from Silvermane's side called out loud and formal. She does. By bloodline claim and direct accusation, challenge acknowledged. Stormborn's jaw hardened. Refusal here would read as fear. He gave a mocking bow. Then let truth breathe. Vivian reached into her cloak and drew out Mara's ledger. Oilcloth peeled back so pages fluttered in the wind. This healer told me I had weeks before labor. Vivian's gaze cut to Mara. That night, my water broke in a ravine where your scouts waited with hounds. Mara flinched. Vivian held the ledger up for all to see. These entries tie Mara to Tempest Claw payments, coded herb lots, patrol schedules, asset in active labor before moonset. She looked directly at Stormborn. Did you script that line, or did she? Stormborn laughed. A stolen notebook? Convenient. Vivian extended her bleeding thumb again. Then I stake blood oath first. She smeared fresh blood across the ledger cover, then onto the tribunal stone. If I lie, let my wolf go silent and my heart fail before dawn. A collective inhale. Blood oath at that level could not be faked by scent. She turned to Stormborn and offered him the blade hilt first. Your turn. For the first time, his confidence thinned. He took the blade anyway, nicked his palm shallowly, too shallow, and slapped blood to stone. I swear my claim stands. The trial keeper, an elder neutral from Granite Vale, stepped forward and inhaled deeply, eyes unfocusing as he read layered scent. His brows snapped together. Stormborn oath is partial, non-binding depth. A snarl rolled through the crowd. Stormborn bared teeth. Technicality. Cowardice, Vivienne said. One hooded Ashfang witness lunged forward, voice cracking. She killed Luna Ilara, I saw. Vivienne cut him off with a sharp burst of pheromones. Wildfire hot, alpha rich, old bloodline dominance she had kept leashed her whole life because it made males panic. It spilled now like sunfire through smoke. The witness choked and dropped to one knee involuntarily. So did the second. Stormborn stiffened, nostrils flaring. What are you doing? Commanding truth, Vivienne said, and pivoted to the kneeling wolves. Smell his gloves. Stormborn wore dark leather gauntlets despite the truce-binding custom that favored bare hands for oath. He took an involuntary step back. Rhea moved first, ripping one glove free and tossing it to the trial keeper. The keeper inhaled and recoiled. Wolfsbane tincture, concentrated, fresh. Another elder grabbed the second glove, sniffed, and swore. Same. Vivienne raised her voice for the whole ring. The same tincture used to taint Ilara's cup before my herb blend was added. Mara's ledgers list Wolfsbane shipments disguised as fever root. Stormborn's scent is on both glove lining and ledger wax. All eyes swung to Mara. She started shaking, hard. Stormborn snapped, Hold your tongue. Mara made a strangled noise that might have been a sob. He said they'd take my son if I didn't, she blurted. He said Ashfang would fall and my boy would starve. I only changed the dates. Just dates at first. Then he... Stormborn whirled and backhanded her so viciously she hit the stone. The crowd exploded. Xavier moved, but Stormborn was faster than any civilized law now. He tore free of his peace binding and shifted in a violent surge of bone and fur, massive storm-gray wolf bursting toward the dais with murder in his eyes. Silvermane met him mid-lunge. The impact sounded like a tree splitting. Xavier shifted partially on contact, claws, fangs, muscle, and drove a shoulder into Stormborn's ribs that sent both alphas skidding across blood-slick stone. Wolves screamed and scattered from the front ring as the duel blew through tribunal order into raw pack violence. Hold the line, Rhea roared. Silvermane guards slammed shields out, hemming witnesses in so they could not flee and later deny what they'd seen. Isolde moved with them, tight to Vivienne's flank, one forearm braced near the sling as a living guardrail. Stormborn recovered fast, snapping for Xavier's throat. Xavier twisted, took the bite on his flank instead, blood sheeted dark over silver-threaded leather. He answered with a four-claw rake that opened Stormborn's shoulder to the bone. Vivienne grabbed the nearest witness by the scruff as he tried to bolt. "Stay and watch," she snarled. "You don't get to hide from truth twice." Stormborn broke from Xavier's grip and spun, straight toward Vivienne and the child strapped to her chest. Exactly what she expected. She had taken one thing from the birthing chamber besides scars, the silver-inlaid blade Isolde had used to cut the cord. Cleaned, honed, tucked at Vivienne's hip under her cloak. As Stormborn lunged, she pivoted, one arm locking over the sling while pain screamed through her healing pelvis, and drove the birthing blade hard into his hind leg just above the hock. Silver burned on contact. Stormborn howled and crashed sideways, back end folding. Xavier hit him before he could regain balance, jaws clamping down at the thick of his throat and forcing him flat against the tribunal stones. Stormborn's claws scrabbled, carving grooves in marble. Blood bubbled at his mouth. Even pinned, he twisted his head toward Vivienne, hate bright and stupid in his eyes. She was supposed to die alone in the snow. he gurgled. Vivienne stepped closer, blood on her hands, snow melting pink around her boots, her son warm and alive against her sternum. "You mistook abandonment for weakness," she said. Xavier's jaws closed. There was a wet crack, a final convulsion, then stillness. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Wind hissed across the ring. Somewhere far downhill, a roof beam collapsed in the fire with a dull boom. Then Stormborn's Beta, trembling, dropped to both knees and pressed his forehead to the stones. "Tempest Claw yields under witness law," he said hoarsely. "I submit host and territory terms to Crown arbitration." One by one, other pack leaders followed, bows, kneels, fists to heart, because they had watched the challenge, the oath, the betrayal, and the kill in legal sequence. No room left for revision. Xavier released the corpse and shifted back, chest heaving, blood running down his side. He looked for Vivienne first. She was already moving to Mara, Rhea, and Isolde, bracketing her as the baby slept through the aftermath, cheek tucked under Vivienne's collar. Mara flinched when Vivienne knelt, expecting a knife. Vivienne didn't offer comfort. She offered law. "You will testify under full ledger review," she said, voice cold and steady. "Then you stand trial for conspiracy, falsified medical declaration, and attempted maternal homicide." Mara covered her face with both hands. "Please. My son." "Your son lives in Ashfang foster records," Vivienne said. "I checked before exile. He was never under Stormborn's guard." Mara froze, then made a broken sound as the last of her excuses died. Rhea hauled her upright in iron cuffs. The trial keeper struck his staff once against stone. "By scent, blood, and witnessed combat, charges against Vivienne Wildfire are void and reversed. False accuser dead, conspirator detained, crown mate and child recognized lawful." The crowd answered with a rolling howl that shook snow from the torches. Vivienne swayed on her feet as adrenaline drained. Xavier reached for her, then stopped just short, waiting. She closed the distance herself, pressing her brow to his, both of them shaking. His blood and hers mixed warm between them in the storm. Night settled deep and clear after the fires were contained. Under the old moon arch above the keep, a ring of pale stone where kings were crowned and oath-bound, the air smelled of pine smoke, cold iron, and new snow. No court, no banners, no crowding alphas, just the hush of mountain dark and the distant guard calls below. Vivienne stood wrapped in a fresh black cloak, hair unbound down her back, pulse loud in her ears, their son sleeping in a secured sling against her chest, while Isolde and Rhea watched at respectful distance. Xavier came up the arch path stripped of armor, wearing only dark trousers and an open shirt. Fresh bandages crossed his flank where Stormborn had raked him. Silver scars caught moonlight across his chest. For the first time since she'd met him, his hands were visibly unsteady. He stopped in front of her, not touching. "Before anyone says ceremony words," he said, voice rough, "I need to ask you plainly." Vivienne's throat tightened. He swallowed once. "May I mark you?" No command, no crown. Just a male asking with his whole heart in his eyes. She could have refused. She felt that freedom like a solid thing under her feet. Instead, she stepped closer until his breath touched her lips and tipped her head, bearing the curve where neck met shoulder, the mate point, vulnerable and sacred. "Yes," she whispered, "mark me." A tremor ran through him, quickly mastered. He lifted one hand and traced the side of her throat with his knuckles, giving her one last chance to pull back. She didn't. His mouth found her skin first, hot, reverent, a press of lips over pounding pulse. Then his fang slid in. Pain flared sharp and white, a crack of lightning down her spine. She gasped, fingers fisting in his shirt. The bite deepened, pressure turning from piercing hurt into a molten ache that spread through her chest, down to her belly, out to her fingertips. Heat slammed through the half-formed bond like floodwater breaching a dam. She felt him too, his shock, his fierce relief, the way his wolf rose and wrapped around hers without crushing. Scent burst between them, cedar and storm, wildfire and milk-sweet pup, blood and snow and home. Their heartbeats staggered, then locked into one driving rhythm. Mine, he breathed against her skin, voice breaking. Yours, she answered, breathless, and the word carried no surrender she didn't choose. He withdrew slowly, licking once to seal. The mark burned, then throbbed in pulsing waves that were almost pleasure, almost tears. Her knees weakened. He caught her waist gently. Bond light shimmered at the edge of vision, silver gold threaded with ember red, then sank beneath skin. She cupped his jaw and tugged him down. Your turn, she said. His eyes flashed, astonished and hungry. He turned his shoulder toward her without hesitation, pushing aside his shirt to bare the heavy muscle where a reciprocal mark would sit visible to any court. Vivienne ran her tongue over the spot once, tasting salt and smoke and male wolf. He shuddered. Ready? She murmured. Always, he said. She bit. His groan tore the quiet. She felt fang meet skin, then resistance give, hot blood flooding her mouth copper-sweet. Power surged back through the bond in a violent, glorious loop, his dominance meeting hers and not swallowing it, her fire meeting his storm and not extinguishing. Pain blurred into fierce pleasure that curled low in her belly and made her claws prick her fingertips. Mate, he rasped, hand braced hard at her hip. Mate, she echoed, sealing the word with pressure before releasing him. His mark welled dark, then began to glow faintly beneath the skin, twin to hers. No one watching could ever call her claimed without acknowledging he was claimed too. She pressed her forehead to his. They were both breathing like they'd run for miles. At the edge of the arch, Rhea looked away with a small private smile. Isolde checked the sleeping baby's wrap and muttered, About time. Xavier brushed his thumb over Vivienne's bitten throat, tenderness stark on a face courts feared. No more alone, he whispered. Vivienne touched the fresh mark on his shoulder. No more silence. Their wolves settled at last. Not caged, not frantic, curled together like storm bank around banked flame. Below the arch, the pack felt it lock. A low thunder of answering howls rose from the keep and rolled into the mountains. Morning brought judgment in full daylight. The great hall was packed shoulder to shoulder. Silvermane captains, allied alphas, Tempest Claw envoys under surrender bans. Ashfang elders summoned by law. At the center stood 3 tables of documents, wax pots, and ledger copies. No rumor would survive this room. Everything was being written. Vivienne entered beside Xavier with their son in his arms. Conversation dipped into a hush when her new mark showed above her collar and Xavier's answering bite glinted at his shoulder. The trial keeper read first, Stormborn's crimes, witness statements, blood oath findings, forfeiture of Tempest Claw war rights. Then came sentencing. Mara of Ashfang, he called. Mara shuffled forward in iron cuffs, hollow-eyed. Vivienne stood to address her herself. You falsified gestational assessment, transmitted target coordinates, and participated in evidence manipulation tied to Aluna's death. By Healer's Code, you are stripped of rank. By coalition law, you are exiled beyond northern borders under escort, never to practice medicine again. Mara's mouth trembled. Mercy, Luna. Vivienne's gaze was flint. Mercy is that you live. Guards led Mara out. Next came Ashfang's turn. Their acting alpha, a broad female with grief carved deep around her eyes, stepped into the center, removed her insignia torque, and knelt. Ashfang wronged Vivienne Wildfire, she said, voice carrying. We accepted forged claims, sanctioned exile, and failed our duty of care to a pregnant pack member. Before witness law, we apologize and submit to reparations. Not words in private, public kneeling where every banner could see. Vivian nodded once. Reparations to every wolf cast out under false charge, not only me, housing rights restored. Winter stores doubled this year from seized storm-borne grain. Done, the acting alpha said, and struck her fist to the floor. Then the Unity Pact. Xavier signed first, broad hand steady. Tempest Claw surrendered territory placed under joint stewardship of Crown and local councils, with no single alpha allowed private levy there for 10 years. 3 allied leaders followed. Wax seals hissed in cooling water. Finally, the keeper lifted the last charter. By Crown assent and coalition vote, he announced. Vivian Wildfire Sill. Vivian raised a hand. Keep Wildfire. A flicker of surprise, then respect, in the room. The keeper corrected smoothly. Vivian Wildfire is hereby invested as High Luna Queen and Royal Healer Regent, vested authority over maternal law, infirmary oversight, and succession witness protocols. He offered her the signet. Vivian took it and stepped to the law table herself. Ink waited. She didn't hesitate. First decree, she said, voice ringing off marble. No pregnant wolf, ranked, unranked, accused, or unmated, may be isolated without a 2-healer review and registered witness. Due date assessments require dual sign-off and scent record archiving. Any violation is grounds for immediate tribunal. Quills scratched furiously as scribes captured every word. Second decree. Healer ledgers become Crown-audited monthly. No private medicinal payments. No coded inventory. Isolde, in the gallery, bared all her teeth in approval. Third, Vivian said, looking straight at the allied alphas who had demanded her surrender days ago. Blood protection petitions may be filed by the vulnerable wolf, not only by an alpha on their behalf. A long pause. Then, slowly, the Frostmaw elder she'd watched get pinned to marble struck fist to chest in acknowledgement. So witnessed. By the time the session adjourned, sunlight had climbed high across the banners. In the corridor outside, Xavier shifted their son up against his shoulder as if he'd done it forever, the baby drooling happily on royal black wool. 2 soldiers passing by tried very hard not to grin. Vivian caught Xavier watching her as she handed law copies to couriers with crisp, healer regent authority. What? She asked. He kissed the fresh mark at her throat, quick and possessive and soft at once. Just admiring my queen terrifying bureaucrats, she snorted. You terrify them with claws, I terrify them with forms. Perfect division of labor. They walked together down the council hall, shoulder to shoulder, their son between them, while behind them scribes carried the new statutes to every gatehouse in the north. Outside, snow began to melt from the marker stones. Inside, truth had finally been written where no one could burn it.